Good Tuesday evening, and welcome to Who Terrorized Who Today. Hi, I'm Phil Gurski from Borealis Threat and Risk Consulting. I'm happy to see so many of you here already here today. Hang on one second, guys. My volume's up on the other thing. That is much better. So, hi, yeah, it's Phil Gurski. And for those who are coming to me for the first time, welcome, welcome, welcome. So, for those who don't know me, I spent 32 years in security intelligence in Canada, split between Canada's Security Intelligence Agency, CSIS, and Communications Security Establishment, which is Canada's Signals Intelligence Agency. Good evening, Bill. Bill from The Rock. For those of you coming back, welcome. For those of you here for the first time, you might want to consider subscribing to this. This is a Monday through Friday live stream. We talk about all things national security. We talk about all things in terrorism related. I see JB's got his beers out tonight. This is good. And the whole purpose of being here is to share information and have a dialogue on things that I think are important, not just to Canadians. I see we have our team from Mumbai is in the house tonight. So welcome from India, guys. I'm so impressed you're getting up so early in the morning to join us. I really appreciate you guys being here. So it was a lovely day here in my part of Canada. It was sunny. It was warm. The snow was starting to melt finally, which is a good thing because there's about 2 meters of snow on my front lawn. As I was walking through the streets today, I couldn't help but notice that a lot of moisture on the sidewalks and on the roads. So it looks like spring may actually be on its way. Now, of course, now that I've said that, I apologize to anyone who lives within 100 kilometers of where I live. That means we're going to get a massive blizzard on Friday. My bad. I won't talk about the weather again. Another interesting thing happened to me today I want to share with you. JB, shut up about the snow being gone where you are. I don't care. I got a royalty check today. Now, I don't know about how many of you have written a book or attempted to write a book and try to find a publisher. I've written 6 books, and the most recent one, which I hardly hope you might consider buying, is called The Peaceable Kingdom. It's a look at terrorism in Canada from Confederation to the present, i.e. from 1867 to the present day, as seen through the eyes of the security services. It's not an academic book. It's not a history. It's an inside story of people working in counterterrorism. This one was self-published. My first 5 were published with recognized academic publishers, and I just got a royalty check from one of the academic publishers this morning. And I can tell you that the amount of money that was sent to me for writing 4 books in 4 years was the equivalent of $1 Canadian a day. So I got $1 Canadian a day for writing 4 books. Ergo, when you write a book for a publisher, you don't get a heck of a lot of royalties, heck of a lot of money coming your way. So I've already made more money from self-publishing in a month than I have, I think, for writing 5 books with academic publishers in the past 5 years. So if you're an aspiring writer, I highly recommend you go the self-publishing route. It's easy. I learned how to do it in a week. You get people to help you, and it is extremely non-difficult to do. So if you have any ideas about publishing, want to talk to me, I'm more than happy to walk you through it. Thanks for the feedback, honest critique in Mumbai. Say this is one of the things we look forward to during the day. I look forward to you guys being here as well. So apparently Bill says the next round is on me. Well, remember that on Fridays is Scotch night and or the alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage of your choice. I just bought a new bottle of Scotch today. I want to try out for the first time. So Fridays is Ask Phil night. So they're completely open agendas. I'm encouraging people to ask me anything they want. Anything to do with national security. But that's for Friday. What about tonight? Well, actually, since our Indian fans are in the house tonight, I want to make reference to an article I found on Al Jazeera this morning. And this was a lead article on Al Jazeera, which of course is a Dubai-based, not Dubai, sorry, a Qatar-based Arabic language and English language Middle Eastern site. And it says 127 Indian Muslims charged with terror acquitted after 19 years. They were arrested basically in the aftermath of 9/11 when they were going to a religious festival in northeastern India's Rajasthan state, and they were picked up for terrorism charges. And it took 19 years. So they were arrested on December 26, 2001. It took 19 years for the acquittals to come through. And we've talked a lot in this live stream already over the past couple of days about how governments are using the term terrorism to refer to things that aren't terrorism at all. So I'm curious, from honest critique, if this story hit the news in India, if there's any reaction to it. But it's one more example of how a government decides to call someone a terrorist, even though they're not. So, interesting article from Al Jazeera this morning. The main topic for tonight is, as I announced, is looking at the feasibility, admissibility of poking fun at other religions. And more specifically, I'm talking about Islam. You may recall that back in 2005, there was a Danish newspaper called Jyllands-Posten, which featured a bunch of Muhammad cartoons. This was in September of 2005. There were 12 cartoons that it had basically contracted out. JB's got his glass of wine. I'm glad to see that. And the whole point of this exercise was to push the boundaries of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. The cartoons were not insulting, at least as far as I'm concerned. I'm not a Muslim, but they didn't strike me as being, over the top kind of thing. When these cartoons were put out, you wouldn't have believed the reaction of the time. So I was at CSIS at the time, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, in late 2005 when the cartoons came up. And we were seeing repercussions here in Canada. People were just livid that this Danish newspaper would dare to publish caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad. They saw it as insulting. They saw it as sacrilegious. They saw it as forbidden. They saw it basically as blasphemy. And there were demonstrations and boycotts against Denmark around the world. Danish flags were burned. There were riots in which people died. And then it kind of petered out. Although the editor of Jyllands-Posten was actually targeted for in a terrorist attack shortly after the cartoons appeared. So, he actually put his life on the line by doing this. But it kind of disappeared. And almost a decade later, 6 years later, the French satirical website Charlie Hebdo decided it was going to publish an editorial that was reportedly written by the Prophet Muhammad. Boy, when that hit the streets, that was an incredible reaction. So that was in November of 2011. A couple years later, in January of 2015, two brothers attacked the offices of Charlie Hebdo in Paris. They shot their way through. They killed 12 people and injured 11 more to basically make this paper, this satirical newspaper, pay for its insult to the Prophet Muhammad and this insult to Islam. So we have people pay with their lives. They pay with their lives. So Soul Crusher is asking, why are the cartoons so important to cancel? Not sure exactly what you're meaning here. I don't think it should have been canceled at all. As I said, they weren't actually. I've seen worse. I've seen an awful lot of worse stuff online, which is actually quite unacceptable from my perspective. These cartoons were very, very neutral in nature. They just basically portrayed the Prophet Muhammad in a caricature kind of way, which is what cartoonists do all the time. I pick up any newspaper in the West. You'll see political cartoons all the time that poke fun at leaders. They poke fun at politicians. They poke fun at athletes. They poke fun at movie stars. They poke fun at singers. And we basically accept that. That's the price of a free and democratic society. That's the price of freedom of expression. Well, something just came out really interesting this morning. I was reading in the media. You'll recall that last fall, there was a man called Samuel Paty, who was a teacher in France. And he was going to lead a discussion on the Muhammad cartoons. And a few days later, he was killed and decapitated by a Chechen terrorist, a Chechen Islamist extremist who wanted him to pay for insulting the Prophet Muhammad. Well, the story just broke this morning that a 13-year-old girl spread rumors that the teacher was going to show a photograph of the Prophet Muhammad naked. And this led to a real shitstorm, including by her father, who, by the way, has been charged with accessory to murder. And the 13-year-old, it turns out, lied First of all, the Prophet Muhammad was not featured naked. Secondly, the girl wasn't even part of that class. She didn't even turn up for that class. And yet her story led to a series of events that led to the actual death and decapitation of this poor teacher. So the question before you tonight is a simple one. What are the limits, if any, when it comes to making fun of people? Are we allowed to make fun of religious figures? Are we allowed to make fun of deities? I see that Bill chimes in with, he had a parallel incident in Afghanistan. So remember, Bill served as an RCMP officer in Afghanistan about a decade ago. And he said he had a parallel incident in Afghanistan when the Reverend Terry Jones decided to burn Qurans in Florida. So Terry Jones, I remember that, Bill. Thanks for chiming in. Terry Jones is not the Terry Jones from Monty Python. He's this evangelical pastor in Florida who thought it'd be a good idea to burn the Quran. Not a real good idea. And Bill says you wouldn't believe the bloodshed and the mayhem that caused in Afghanistan. And he saw it first thing. See, to me, and I'm curious what anyone else thinks on this conversation, that is unacceptable. It's acceptable to actually, show a cartoon, poke fun at people. It's not okay to start burning someone's holy book. And in any way, it's okay to burn a Bible or burn the Torah or burn Hindu sacred text or Buddhist sacred text. Others would say anything's on the table. That as long as you're not advocating violence yourself, you can actually burn anything. Trying to get here. Well, yeah. So Aaron chimes in that yes, there is a notion among some people that the Prophet Muhammad cannot be shown. You'll often see in Muslim hagiography, in Muslim art, that the Prophet Muhammad is never shown with a face. So it's kind of like blanked out in a way. So for some people, it's impossible just to do that. Others are a lot more lenient in that. I've definitely seen pictures of the Prophet Muhammad, but some very conservative fundamentalist Muslims say that it can't be done. The bottom line is that, and both Soul Crusher and Bill have weighed in on this. It's a very, 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 very small number of people that take acts or who cause acts of violence because of this. This is not representative of the 1.1 billion Muslims on the planet. It's a very, very, very small number of people. The problem is, and you've seen it as well as I have, guys, a lot of people will take this information and they will essentially expand it, saying all Muslims are this way. All people believe in this kind of thing. And it's simply not the fact. So JB says, limits are simple for me. You can make fun of people's choices, not what they were born with. That's a good point, right? So if you're born a Muslim, doesn't mean you can't make fun of being a Muslim. We here in a country like Canada, a liberal secular democracy, we've come to accept that basically anything goes, with very, very few exceptions. So you can't threaten to kill somebody. Child pornography is off the agenda, whereas any kind of pornography is off the agenda in other places, right? Whereas it's acceptable in a Western society. So each country has its own way of doing things, but it's only when people start advocating, acts of violence in the name of their religion, which I've been talking about for the past 20 years with respect to Islamist extremism, or people take offense to the so-called, lampooning of their faith, that's when they say you can't do that. Well, you can, and you have to sort of suck it up. You can protest, you can boycott, you can do all kinds of things, but you simply cannot advocate an act of violence just because somebody decided to make fun of your religion. I mean, that's to me, that's completely unacceptable. I don't see any justification for that. For those who are just joining us, you're joining Who's Terrorizing Who Tonight. I'm Phil Gurski, president of Borealis, former Canadian security intelligence officer. If it's your first time, welcome. I'd love to see you guys subscribe to this particular live stream and like it on YouTube. It'd be great. Also, advise you, if you could, just to subscribe to the website in general, borealisthreatandrisk.com. Get all kinds of information there. There are podcasts, there are blogs, there are media interviews. In fact, you'll see on YouTube tomorrow, we're airing a great interview I did with Tony McAleer, who is a Canadian former skinhead, a former white supremacist who has turned his life around. And it's a very emotional interview I did with him about what it was that got him out of this lifestyle into a normal, more mainstream Canadian lifestyle. That's going to come out up on YouTube tomorrow. Some more comments here. JB says, if you live all your life in an environment where everyone around you is religious, you never had the opportunity to even doubt. Is it still a choice? I don't know. I think in every in every society, even if you're surrounded by people who believe the exact same thing that you do, there's always a choice. There are people that leave religions all the time. There are people that decide this is not for me, even if you're from a Catholic community or a Protestant community or a Jewish community or a Buddhist community. I mean, choice is choice, right? It's true. You may not be exposed to a lot of different options. You may not be aware of other possibilities out there, but everyone definitely has a choice. Soul Crusher says, as a cultural thing, people teach to their own. I don't see a problem with that, but I just don't subscribe to the idea of it. So this is further to your notion that religion is crazy. My late mother, my dear mother, used to say, whatever you do, son, don't talk about religion and politics. And so I became a terrorism analyst. So Mom, again, I apologize. I didn't take your advice at all. That's all I do is talk about religion and politics. Religion is a sensitive topic. I get that. But it doesn't mean that it's completely immune from criticism. It's not completely immune from making fun of. That's the nature of freedom. That's the nature of freedom of speech, freedom of thought, freedom of association. Our honest critique in India says, who decides what's the line that defines something that falls under freedom of speech or something is blasphemy? Wow. What a great question, to which I have no answer. I'm curious, is there a blasphemy law in India, guys? Because there's no blasphemy law that I'm aware of in Canada. There used to be, like decades and decades and decades ago. But you would never see someone charged with blasphemy here in Canada. It's unacceptable in the 21st century, even in the 20th century. People are free to believe. They're free not to believe. They're free to make fun of. They're free to protest as long as it's nonviolent. They're free to push back. They're free to debate. They're free to argue. They're not free to kill someone. So I'm just curious, guys, if you could point to, is there actually a blasphemy law in India? I wouldn't be surprised if there is, given the rise of Hindu nationalism and Hindu extremism in your country, which I've talked about an awful lot. It's kind of scary what's happening under the Modi government. JB says, I mean, if everyone around you always told you something was, why would you even doubt it in the first place? It's easier to doubt and leave when you have examples. Well, you're exactly right. But, in a country like Canada, people go to university, they go to college, they go to work. We don't live in the same village that we used to. It used to be said during the Middle Ages and before that the average person in England never got further than 10 kilometers, maybe 10 miles in that case, since this is before kilometers, didn't move more than 10 miles from their house in their entire lives, which means you were born, lived, and died within a 10-mile radius of your house because there was no mass transportation in the 1300s or the 1200s or the 900s. A lot's changed right now. Not only do we travel a lot more, we have access to the internet. We're here live streaming on the internet. I can open up a screen here, type in any question. I can ask Alexa. I can say, hey, Google, tell me something. So everybody has access to information. So you can't live in a bubble. Well, you can choose to live in a bubble, but you certainly have access to information like never before in human history. So even those who have been sheltered, you have the option. You may choose not to accept the option. You may choose not to embrace it, but you certainly have that option. Ijaz says, one controversial element of the Paty story was the projection of cartoons onto France's government buildings. In your opinion, was it a useful show of solidarity from French officials or unnecessary? Wow, Ijaz, what a brilliant question. It is a fine line, I think, as Honest Critique said. I don't know if that line was crossed. I don't have an answer for you. I think you have to be really, there's asserting your right under freedom of speech, and there's rubbing it in. I don't think anything was gained by flashing the cartoon up on a building. It was already out there. They could Google it. They could see it. By putting it in the public domain, it almost sounds as if the government was backing it. I'm not sure the government wants to be put in that situation. Now, interestingly, for those who don't know, and I did a podcast or blog about this, that when this decapitation took place, my Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, did not denounce it immediately. In fact, his first words were, nobody should yell fire in a crowded theater. So this refers to this old adage that there are, in fact, some limitations on freedom of speech. He was criticized for not first announcing the decapitation and then talking about what is a more healthy dialogue to have. That would have been a much better sequence of events, which my prime minister did not do. And event, a few days later, he realized the error of his ways, and then he did, in fact, denounce the decapitation. But I think, Jazz, I think, you may have asked the best question of the night, and that is, when is that line crossed? And Honest Critique asked the same question. What is acceptable? What is not? I don't know. I think it's based on a case by case scenario. I think every instance is different. Honest Critique says, not exactly a law for blasphemy, but there's section 295A in the Indian Penal Code defined as deliberate and malicious acts intending to outrage religious feelings of any class. Interesting. So in effect, it's not blasphemy per se, but if I make fun of Hindus or make fun of Christians or Muslims in India, I can be, in theory, charged with a crime. And that would never happen in Canada unless it was a hate crime. And a hate crime is a very different part of the criminal code. It does completely agree. The dynamic changes significantly when the state itself is involved in the propagation of offensive, albeit subjectively so, material. Yeah, I don't see why the French state would have done this. Now, okay, France is big into laïcité, right? The secular nature of the French state is big in France. This is why President Macron has passed this new law in which he's trying to ban any overt public demonstration of religion. So, you can't wear crucifixes anymore. You can't wear the hijab. You can't wear the Jewish yarmulke. You have to be completely neutral. France has been this way for well over a century, since the early part of the 20th century. This is maybe why the French state elected to do this. But I see it really as stoking a fire that's unnecessary. The point was already made. The cartoon was out there. A man died. We can denounce the killing without piling it on. That's just my humble opinion. Others would say, freedom of speech means freedom of speech. You can do whatever the heck you want. There's no limits on it. That's what absolute freedoms are all about. And I don't know if there's any Americans on the live stream tonight, but that's what you'll get with a lot of Americans in terms of their First Amendment. There are no limits. And this is why a lot of activity that happens in the United States is not viewed as criminal in nature, although it would be here in Canada. It'd probably be called a hate crime. Might be called a hate crime in India as well. So, I don't know, guys. This is a really interesting topic. But the bottom line is that this young lady in France, 13 years old, she's going to be charged with something. I say her father has already, and we'll see where it goes. I want to come back to sentencing in terrorism in a second. Bill says, stating the obvious, the value systems of democracies, theocracies, dictatorships, etc., are all very different. We all see through different lenses. However, violence is never the answer. Yeah, absolutely, Bill. We can agree to disagree. We can not like what other people say, but that's it. You can't advocate taking someone's life just because you disagree with them. Repercussions, Soul Crusher, absolutely, there are repercussions. But let me get back to this sentencing thing for a second. So this 13-year-old in France, who knows what's going to actually happen to her, okay? She's very, very young. I'm not sure what French laws are like. Certainly in Canada, you can't do anything with a 13-year-old. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bill, but there's no way in Canada a 13-year-old would get anywhere near the criminal justice system. Here's the story I came across in the Evening Standard in the United Kingdom. This is just from today. It's a couple days ago. Let's read you the first paragraph. Nearly half of the terrorists jailed last year, so in 2020, received short sentences of under 4 years that will allow them to return to the streets relatively rapidly. So that 9 of the 49 offenders convicted of terrorism, according to the Home Office in 2020 in the United Kingdom, were jailed for a year or less. 13 got between 1 and 4 years. 15 got between 4 and 10 years. I don't know about you guys, but convicted of a terrorism charge should carry a little bit more than 4 years in jail. We're not that different here in Canada. When I worked on the Toronto 18 case in the mid-2000s, this was a case that spanned 2005, 2006. In the end, 18 people were convicted of terrorism. 7 of the 18 were actually, 7 were acquitted. And of the 11 found guilty, 4 got time served. Only 4 or 5 actually served serious jail time. And here was a group that was going to blow up 3 tons of ammonium nitrate in 3 targets, 2 in Toronto and 1 probably at the Trenton Air Force Base, kind of halfway between Kingston and Toronto in Ontario, probably to coincide with the repatriation of a dead Canadian soldier from Afghanistan. And most of them actually got time served or acquitted. What does that say about our criminal justice system? So I don't think the 13-year-old is going to get near a court anytime soon. Her dad's already been charged because he was an accomplice to the murder. But this young lady, I don't think anybody thinks, as Bill says, youth are treated very differently in the Canadian criminal justice system. Depending on the gravity of the offense, it could range from diversion, counseling, or to jail time. When's the last time we put a 13-year-old in jail, though, Bill? I'm thinking probably a century ago, when laws were a little bit different. Anyhow, guys, the bottom line on Soul Crusher asked, would a declaration of war be considered terrorism? Give me some context on that one, because I'm not sure I know where you're going with this. Normally, a declaration of war, I don't think it's terrorism, despite the fact Islamic State has declared war, Al-Qaeda declared war, Al-Shabaab has declared war on Somalia, Boko Haram has declared war on Nigeria. It's not the declaration that matters, it's the actual acts. So if a terrorist group actually carries out an act of violence, then yeah, that could be an act of terrorism. But saying it's going to carry an act of violence, again, it would depend on the local laws, but the mere declaration itself does not constitute terrorism, at least not in my books. Others may disagree with me. Just a reminder, you're listening to Who's Terrorizing Who Tonight. My name is Phil Gurski, president of Borealis and former Canadian strategic intelligence analyst specializing in terrorism. Heartily hope that you like this channel on YouTube, please. And we're looking to get more subscribers. We just passed the 700 amount last night. So thank you. See if we can get a few more tonight. Any other questions, guys? So Bill says, yeah, the last time a 13-year-old was actually brought to court. It's funny, when I was growing up in London, there was a famous case called a young man called Stephen Truscott, who was accused of rape of a young girl near where I live, up sort of in the Bruce Peninsula area. And he was found guilty, and he was actually sentenced to death. This was in the early 1950s, I believe. He was a little older than I was. And it turns out he was erroneously found guilty, and he was not executed. The death penalty didn't apply to him. And eventually he wrote a book, The Stephen Truscott Story. I read it when I was in high school, showing about the criminal justice system and how it failed him. But that's the last time I recall someone that young that was actually going to be put to death for a crime. That's in the 1950s. Soul Crusher, who is the most active terrorist group in the world? Hands down, Islamic State and all its affiliates. So just to give you a real quick rundown, Islamic State is still active in Iraq and Syria. They're carrying out daily, if not weekly, if not daily attacks in those two countries. There's an Islamic State affiliate in Yemen. There's one in Afghanistan. There's one in India. There's one in Egypt. There's one in Nigeria. There's one in Central Africa. There's one in Eastern Africa. There's other parts of the African. There's one in the Sahel, sort of North Africa. And these guys are carrying out attacks on a weekly basis. They are decapitating people in Mozambique. They are killing people in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They're killing people in Mali, in Niger, Central African Republic, Nigeria, Egypt, Yemen. The list goes on and on and on and on. So despite the fact that President Trump said that ISIS was dead, defeated, 100%, the president told us, he was categorically wrong. They're still very, very active. Who's the current leader? I think the current leader is a man called Al-Mawla. He's called the Destroyer, I believe is his nickname. He took over from al-Baghdadi, who was killed in 2019. So getting back to the cartoon thing, JB says, no one should be killed over cartoons. This is ridiculous. But if you know how people will react when you do so, even if we agree they're in the wrong, what is the point of poking the bear? I don't know. Freedom of speech. Now, I hate the term slippery slope argument, guys. I hate it, because it's a weak way of making a debate. It's a weak way of doing analysis. So, well, if people say, well, if you don't publish Muhammad cartoons, then tomorrow you can't publish political cartoons. And if you can't do that, then you can't publish satire of any sort. I don't like that kind of reasoning. It's very sloppy. So again, I think the bottom line is these questions are really good ones, and there's no definitive line on any of this. There's no black and white. As I like to say on a regular basis, life is multiple shades of gray. I don't know if there's 50 Shades of Gray. I haven't read that novel or seen that movie, but there are a lot of shades of gray in life. And I think that we as citizens, whether we're citizens of India or North America or wherever you guys are coming in from tonight, we have to acknowledge that life is complicated and that each case must be judged by its own merits. It's never as simple as that. Bill says he has a couple of former UNODC colleagues working in Mozambique, and they've told me that things have gotten very tense because of the presence of the IS Islamic State affiliate. You're absolutely right, Bill. And for those who are interested, who don't subscribe to my website, borealisthreatandrisk.com, you might want to check out an interview I did about 4 or 5 months ago, I think, with Jasmine Opperman, who's a South African analyst. She knows the situation in Mozambique really, really well. We had a fascinating talk. She explained the history of it, where it is, and this is a bunch of guys. There's actually kind of two groups. Maybe they're the same. I'm not sure. One is called Al-Shabaab, not the same Al-Shabaab in Somalia. The other is Islamic State Central African Province. And they've been carrying out terrorist attacks on a regular basis in Mozambique, which of course is on the east coast, the southeast coast of Africa. Not a lot known about Mozambique, former Portuguese colony. Huge oil reserves. It's very important. The oil industry is very important in Mozambique. And is the Islamic State affiliate has been killing villagers on a regular basis and decapitating them. So, I concur with what your colleague's telling you, Bill. Things in Mozambique ain't good, and they're not getting any better. I'm following the news in Mozambique, and it seems that there's no end in sight. Is Islamic State active in Canada, says Soul Crusher? I don't know. When I left the security service in 2015, I think the answer was we had wannabes. We had about 200 Canadians that joined terrorist groups abroad. I'm not sure how many joined Islamic State, but there were a bunch of them. Some of them actually died in terrorist attacks, carrying out acts on behalf of the Islamic State. We had a man called Tamim Chowdhury from Windsor, Ontario, right across the river from Detroit, who went into a cafe in Dhaka in Bangladesh. I was at that cafe back in 2018, I believe, on a trip to debrief the Bangladeshis. And on Canada Day, July 1st, 2016, Chowdhury went into a cafe with a bunch of guys, took hostages, killed 21 people. He was acting on behalf of Islamic State. We had wannabes here. We had a guy in Edmonton in 2018, ran over a cop outside a football stadium with Islamic State flag on his dashboard. We had a woman named Rahab Dugmash in the June of 2018, walked into a Canadian Tire, which is a hardware store here in Canada, and hit people with a golf club. She had an Islamic State banner or bandana or something on her head. So yeah, we've had Islamic State wannabes here in Canada. I don't know the extent of it anymore because I don't work for the security service. There hasn't been an attack in several years in Canada that's been attributed to Islamic State inspired, as it said. I just call them wannabe wankers because, they probably can't spell Islamic State. Islamic State doesn't know anything about them, although it will claim the attacks afterwards. That's what Islamic State does. That's what Al-Qaeda does. They claim people they know nothing about because it makes them look good. It shows they have influence around the world. Any last thoughts, guys, before I finish up for tonight? I'm hoping that on average, I'm going to probably try to spend about a half an hour on these podcasts. Realpolitik chimes in. Good to see. Hey, yeah, welcome back. How active are Sikh extremists now in Canada? Okay, we leave that question for tomorrow night because that's a really good question, and I'd like to treat it differently because I'd like to get the input of if Honest Critique can join us tomorrow night as well from India. You guys will have some really good insight on Sikh extremism from an Indian perspective, and I can win from the Canadian one. So for those of you who follow me on the other sites, you'll know that I have a regular feature when I do my podcast, and it's called The Hardy Boys Guide to Life. Well, I have since found, this is the book, it's called The Hardy Boys Guide to Life. Now, I'm not sure if you know who the Hardy Boys are. When I was a kid growing up, I read the Hardy Boys. I read most of their novels. They were written by a man called, I think his name was Franklin Dixon? I believe was his name. Anyway, these were great, detective stories for kids. They weren't hard, they weren't hard to read. Maybe 150 pages. And there was these two detectives. They were the sons of Fenton Hardy, and they were boy detectives. So I now have, in the spirit of gender inclusion, I have the Nancy Drew Guide to Life. So I've been reading from the Hardy Boys for months now, and I'm going to actually read to you some survival strategies from Nancy Drew. So this comes from a book called The Hidden Staircase. And in this, Nancy advises, if the ceiling collapses, breathe through a handkerchief to avoid inhaling dust. Thank you, Nancy. I think if the ceiling falls on your head, one of the least worries you have is where to find your handkerchiefs. You don't breathe in the dust. It'd be nice if you actually survived the collapsed ceiling first and foremost before you search for your handkerchief. Anyhow, so that's what Nancy Drew has to say. We'll have another quote from either the Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew tomorrow night. Thank you very, much for all for showing up tonight. Great questions, guys. Great dialogue. I think the bottom line is we don't have an answer to the question, is it okay to poke fun at religion? As with most things in life, the real answer is it depends. I appreciate you guys being here. I'll see you tomorrow night. Same Borealis time, same Borealis channel at 8 p.m. Eastern. Remember to like this on YouTube. Tell your friends about it so we can get more people. Remember to subscribe if you're not a subscriber. And enjoy the rest of your evening, guys. For me, it's time for a scotch before I go to bed. Thanks again to our morning risers in India. Honest critique, guys. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'm sure that you don't have to worry about snow in your part of the world. But we'll see you guys tomorrow, I hope. Okay, guys, take care. And thanks again for showing up tonight.